A number of years ago, one of our kids was really struggling to make it through a week of school without some sort of outburst in his behavior. We had great teachers, great administrators at his school, and we met with them quite frequently to try and figure out what it was that he needed to both learn and to develop his peer relationships. But it was really hard. And eventually, we realized as his parents that we had no idea how to best support him in this phase. We loved him. We wanted the best for him, but these behaviors, both at school and at home, were negatively impacting our relationships with each other and with both of our kids, if we're honest. So we sought help from a licensed family therapist. And early on, when we met with him, he taught us the power of a do-over. When our son would say something angrily, we learned to patiently and calmly say, "Please try that again with kinder words." When he would throw something, we'd say, "I'll wait for you to pick that up and carefully put it down where it belongs." When he would slam his door, we'd actually open it again and ask him for a redo in closing it carefully, even if it took 3 or 4 times. This counselor said that it was not crazy for us to even ask him to walk back to the first place where he started the outburst and to redo the entire situation. Rather than for us to yell, "That is unacceptable," or to let our emotions get the best of us as we simply moved right to the punishment, he suggested that the power of a do-over, of a second chance, you might say, would actually have a more lasting effect on his behavior and on the attitudes of our entire family. As we think this week about second chances, whether we're seeking a second chance for ourselves, maybe we're wondering how we can be the ones offering a second chance to the people in our lives, today, I want to look at a story from Matthew, where we read about the feeding of the 5,000, where I think Jesus had his disciples practice a do-over, which led to something pretty powerful. Matthew 14, it starts with kind of a tragic and dramatic story about John the Baptist being arrested and being put in prison. Herod is sensing that Jesus is a threat, and he sees Jesus' friend, John, as a threat as well. John is the one who's been baptizing people. He's been telling people all about Jesus. So Herod eliminates the threat. He brutally beheads John. And when Jesus hears about what happened to his friend, he withdraws. Understandably, he needs some time alone. But the crowds, being curious crowds, they follow Jesus. And Jesus, we might say, being Jesus, sets aside his emotions of John's death and offers healing to the crowds like he had been doing before. And now it's getting close to dinner time, and the disciples say in verse 15, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to their villages and buy themselves some food." It's like the disciples see themselves as Jesus' manager. They want Jesus to send these people home so they can fend for themselves. The period of healing, it was nice, but we're closing up shop, Jesus. But Jesus, he looks at his disciples and says, "No. Let's try that again. They do not need to go away. You need to give them something to eat." They stutter, we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, Jesus." So Jesus, he instructs the disciples to give those loaves of bread and fish to him. He blesses them, and then he gives them back to the disciples. It's like he's patiently saying, "I'll wait for another do-over, you guys." And then we read that the disciples distribute their food to the entire crowd. Not only was everyone satisfied, but there were actually pieces left over, we read in verse 20. A lot of times this story is referred to as a miracle, that Jesus somehow snapped his fingers and suddenly there was enough. But I wonder, what if this is more of a reminder about the power of a do-over? What if it's a story about the generosity that can result from looking around us and from realizing we have more than enough? From the disciples actually walking around and meeting the crowds, looking them in the eye, hearing what it was that brought them to Jesus in the first place as they're handing over their fish and their bread. And in that do-over process of sharing what they had, what if the disciples actually inspired the crowds to generously share what they had as well? When our son was younger, our words only went so far in their ability to help him learn. He actually needed to practice the motions, to say the words to himself rather than just hear them from us. And it wasn't a simple process. It was way easier to go on with our instinct of yelling or jumping to some kind of consequence or punishment. But here's what I'll say. Our practice of giving him a second chance over and over and over, it's changed us as parents. We still offer do-overs to our kids even now. It doesn't always change the consequence of what they have to deal with, but it changes our posture within our family and in our other relationships as well. For you, maybe it's with your family, maybe it's with your community. Whatever it is, I invite you to ask, what has changed when you've been given a do-over, and what could change if you were to offer one as well?